Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Volunteering. I'm your host, Stormy Bell. And today, my guest is someone that's kind of a new friend, but she's back in the beginning of the year. I was on a podcast called Imperfect Marketing, hosted by Kendra Corman. And it was all about volunteering and podcasting and everything that went with that. And my guest reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm in the volunteer sphere as well." So we've met and we've become fast friends. And I just know you're going to enjoy our conversation today. So, Angela Williamson, welcome to the Art of Volunteering.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and love what you're doing with this.
Awesome. Okay, Angela has 19 years experience as a volunteer engagement leader in a museum and at the Blood Bank of Delmarva. Angela is a consultant and has presented for many places, been on podcasts, president of the DAVA, started an Alive Healthcare COP, awarded the Alive Impact Award in 2022. She began her volunteering early in life, picking up trash at a state fair to earn concert tickets along with other volunteers.
Yes.
Well, welcome,
Yes.
Angela. All right, so what concert was it to go see?
Okay, it's funny. This will date me, but it was Amy Grant.
Oh, really? That's awesome. That
Yeah. Yeah. As a
that's
little, as not little, but we were probably elementary, middle school for me, something
okay.
like that. So it was, she was pretty big at that point, early
Yeah,
big, kind of
she
thing. So
was. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
the jelly
Yeah.
jelly shoes were the thing.
Yes. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
middle high.
Boy, am I dated. Sorry. There we
That's
are.
okay. We
It's
probably
all
have a very
good.
similar timeline on things
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
Very cool. So I just want to when we sat down for coffee, we started to talk about how organizations need to reframe um, volunteers and volunteer engagement to fit into their strategic goals instead of simply having a volunteer program. Let's start there. Can you dive in with that and we'll just keep the conversation going?
I love this question and I love this topic because if you think of nonprofits right now, oftentimes it's volunteers are a program or they're added on or they're limited in what they do. They only do this little bit in this little part of the organization. And volunteers really are, and I've been putting this in my LinkedIn, I'm talking more about this, how volunteers are us. If you think about it, you and I volunteer, and as a volunteer, we're not a completely different person when we go to work, right? It's not like at work, we're this way. And as a volunteer, we're this way. We're still the same person. We're still bringing everything that's in us and who we are to both. And so I like to really look at this as a pay grade. It's a pay scale. Volunteers, of course, are not getting paid money as a paycheck, and but they're still bringing all of their enthusiasm and sometimes even more enthusiasm because they're choosing to come to this organization and there's not a paycheck tied to this. And so they have their enthusiasm, their skill set, their personality, their all of their things that they have come with, and they're so excited about it. So the strategy then would be to have volunteers involved in all areas and all levels of the organization in proper ways. There are certain things, like I work at the blood bank, and volunteers will never be sticking arms. And so,
True.
there are definitely roles that volunteers should not be doing. But in general, nonprofits traditionally have kind of pigeonholed them into certain places. And so I really would love to challenge nonprofits to think about that. And that's something that I've done both at the museum I was at and currently at the blood bank, is to really challenge, like, why can't a volunteer do that? Why can't a volunteer be in this role? Why can't a volunteer be helping you? And so it's really been expanding the roles of volunteers throughout the fabric of the organization. And it helps build capacity, it builds enthusiasm, it builds just that community awareness and community support. In fact, we just are supporting the Food Bank of Delaware right now through their cangineering project. And that's a project where you collect food, and then as an organization or a business, you build a structure or a thing out of the food, and then they come and it's this fun thing that they come judge. Well, at the blood bank, it ended up being me and the volunteers. And there was a volunteer that I knew was construction savvy.
Oh,
And so
nice.
he has built our frame. And then it was other volunteers that came and helped build it with the food. And it was truly volunteers with my, leadership. My boss came in and out, as she could, but basically the whole thing was really created, designed, and made then by the volunteers. So that was something that's going to be really a great social media post for the blood bank, getting more interest and more awareness. And that was volunteers. So it was my staff time, which it makes sense because it's volunteers, and it's community relations, which is part of my role too. So that those volunteers brought those skill sets and enabled us to do more and go farther with that, like social media. So programs come and go, right? You can tack on a program, you can tack on a this, but volunteers, if you create volunteers as a program, that means they could just disappear, right? You can just, oh, we don't need them. We don't need that program. So they're off the table now. And you're losing such capacity building, enthusiastic people. And the volunteers that came, one of them works at a manufacturer that has extra fabrics on bolts that staff can request, and otherwise it would, I guess, go to waste or go to, I'm not sure where it goes, but it was enough fabric for us to use to wrap up the cardboard inserts that are inside the fabrics. She brought those were our walls. I mean, so she was bringing supplies, and the other volunteer, the builder, he was bringing in extra supplies from his home and his own tools. So that didn't cost the blood bank anything. They brought all of the supplies. And so it's, again, they're so enthusiastic. They're providing their own supplies. And so it's just an amazing capacity building kind of role to include volunteers in all places. And I could go on and on about that, about examples, right? About
No,
how that has
I love
helped.
it. I love it. No, volunteers, when they're part of the strategy, they feel more a part of the organization. They already
Yes.
believe in the organization because that's why they're giving their time, but they
Mhm.
become invested to a deeper level. So I would say that we see longer retention of those volunteers when they become more invested and actually
Mhm.
part of the greater mission.
Absolutely. And part of that, the stickiness, right, of having volunteers stay. I know that there's talk about, longevity and retaining, and I'm going to say that there's not a formula for retaining volunteers because each volunteer has their own life and their own interests and their own level of and their own capacity of commitment. And they might want to stay with you longer, but something's happened in their life, or things changed, or their interests change, or whatever happens. But what I think of as retaining volunteers is making sure that we are retaining them as long as they want to be retained, if that makes sense, right?
It
So
does.
that
That
then
does.
they're we're not cutting it short on our end. Their what do I want to say, involvement. And so it's not us that's doing something that's turning them away. It's their choice, their life, their whatever they want to do, but we want to make it as sticky as possible so they want to stay as long as they want to stay. And there are definitely ways to do that with appreciation in good ways, and involving them again as part of the strategy. I do new hire orientation now with all new staff, which I was really grateful when the HR was able to do that, for have me involved. And I had to ask and ask and ask. Um, and so when that finally happened, it's been great because now all the new staff know me. I know at least the faces of all the staff because I forget some of them because there's enough, and I don't see them every day. But at least there's a familiarity of like, oh, Angela does the volunteers, right? So if there's a question when they see a volunteer in a different center, on a mobile, whatever, then they know to talk to me, or they know, that at least I'm their contact. So it builds a lot of community. And one of the things I cover in new hire orientation for the staff is to say hello and to get to know the volunteers. One, that we have volunteers, right? And
Right.
two, how to treat them and how do they want to be treated themselves. And I remind them what I talked about earlier was that as a staff, you're not a totally different person as a volunteer, right? I bring that up in that you can, and many of our staff that come in have volunteered somewhere. So I'm like, okay, so you've been a volunteer and now you're getting paid as staff. Are you a different person? And they're like, no. Okay, exactly.
Right.
So that's the same thing. Just think about that when you're interacting with our volunteers. So that's part of the stickiness too, is staff understanding what the volunteers need. And most of the time, many of the volunteers, for me, their top like love appreciation language is just that need to be that personal thank you and that interaction. And so it's being recognized, it's being seen, being heard, and being, asked what you need or how you doing, and making those relationships. So relationship building is huge. Um, so there's just so much that goes into that. But as part of that's part of the strategy, right? The new hires are now getting familiar that there are volunteers. So it's not just a program that we're tacking on that, like, oh, that thing over there, that you may not know all the things about a program, right? So if your organization has a program but you work in a totally different area, you may or may not know all of the things about that program. But with integrating the volunteers into I'll call it the fabric of the organization, then they are part of that. And then anything, like if you pull a string on a fabric, it affects a lot of things. And
Yes.
so it's just realizing that volunteers are part of that fabric. And then when you start pulling a string or two of whatever, it affects the volunteers as well. And so I think that's strategy, versus like tacking it on as a program. And then the benefit of having the strategy is, again, that longevity, like you said, of the volunteers sticking around as long as they want to stick around, because they're going to feel part of it and they feel included. And as the volunteer leader of the or the volunteer engagement leader of the volunteers, the paid staff, I really work hard to make sure that they're informed about what's going on, the incentives that are going on, the news, all those things, so that they feel like they are really part of the team and that they know what's going on. They don't find out about it in the news or from their neighbor or, whatever.
Right.
So there's so many different ways to do that and make them that part of strategy. And then the other part of strategy is my end, is I've been working with every single department and I keep asking and asking and asking and suggesting, well, could a volunteer help you with that? Oh, well, why
Right.
not? And so that's part of me being strategic, is trying to like get volunteers into as many areas as possible that make sense. I'm not forcing it if it doesn't make sense. Like,
Right.
again, they're not at the
They're
blood
not going to
bank.
be the phlebotomist.
Correct. Don't worry, they're not your phlebotomist. Right.
Wow, that's amazing. I love how when we talk about strategies, like like in a college setting, we're looking to do a mentor program and for our first year students. So we're looking at college retention, we're looking at mental well-being, we're looking at just that adjustment to the first year. Those are all things that fit into the strategic goals of the university.
Yeah.
Those are, you're going to have similar goals happening with volunteers for the nonprofit organization. Can you touch on that a little bit, like what that would look like?
Yeah, so each organization has their own mission
Yep.
and of impact, right? So what's the impact? So a food bank, that I talked about, they're trying to collect food and to be able to give that out to people that need it. Other organizations are providing shelter or clothing or whatever, or skills that maybe somebody needs to move on and move up into a better employment situation. So you have to look at your mission, but then you can look at where do volunteers help you, right? So where can volunteers help in all of that? And I think that's it goes back to, then volunteers can help in all of these ways, and then you're showing the impact. So as a volunteer, at least I do, and what I'm finding with most of the volunteers I work with, they want to see the impact. Like, they're coming because they care. They're coming because they want to make a difference. They're coming because they just want to make an impact. And what I'm finding is that the more meaningful and not necessarily always in depth, but sometimes the it depends on the volunteers. Some volunteers just want to pop in, pop out, and they're happy with that. Other volunteers, they want to like dive deep and they want to really get some meat in there. And so, as far as like something substantial that they're doing, and so I think that that's part of it. But then what I'm finding, I asked a volunteer to interview other volunteers and ask them what volunteering to BBD means to them. And the volunteer that's doing that, he just did his 41st interview with fellow volunteers. And those stories, there's information in there about volunteers that I didn't know about them. And I just love that one. So I get to know the volunteers better. And I post those so other volunteers get to know other volunteers better. And these stories are showing that the volunteers are getting meaning out of this. They're getting well being out of this, the mental health. And I think, something that I've heard and that I say is like a body in motion keeps going, right? It stays in motion. And so, um, I really think for volunteers, especially any of them that are like, quote, aging, we're all aging every day, but,
Absolutely.
at their post retirement and they're like, now what do I do with my life? Right. And so they're looking for meaning and purpose and they don't want to just sit at home and do nothing because it feels for the volunteers who are coming out, that's not what they want to do. And so it's giving them that purpose and that meaning, and it's absolutely doing that. And then they're inviting other friends. We have volunteers that are recruiting their friends to come volunteer or to give blood or whatever it is. And so that can happen in each organization, is that those volunteers, as you engage them into more and more even leadership roles, they feel really responsible. They feel like really part of the team, and they call it a job. I can't because they're not getting paid, right? So I
Right,
call them
right.
roles and things like that. But they view it like it's their job, and so it's become that meaning for them. Which, if we're meaningless and our purposeless in our life, like I think we all know, we're just kind of floating around being like bummed, and it's not great for us. And so it definitely volunteering in general helps everybody. Just it helps the volunteer, it helps the mission and the organization that you're helping. It makes the world a better place all the way around, quite honestly.
It elevates the entire community.
100%. Yeah.
And another benefit from that is that they become strong advocates for the BBD or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
organization you're working for, like
Yeah.
ambassadors. And
Yes.
ambassadors, they hold a very
Yeah.
high role in what they're doing.
Hmm.
Like they're the ones out there. I've heard people
Yeah.
refer to them as like an evangelist for the
Hmm.
organization, where they have seen it from the inside
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they believe in it.
Yeah.
You're going to listen to them when they share their story. They're the
Right.
ones at the
Yeah.
graduation party is like, oh, what are you up to? I volunteer at XYZ, and
Yep.
this is what I get
Yeah.
to do. you know
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
that just spreads it even more, so it's
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's another, in my mind, that's another reason why
Hmm.
organizations need to, as you say, move from programs to strategies,
Hmm.
because that word of mouth, marketing that comes
Yeah.
out of it, using like a business term to go with it,
Hmm.
just they do more, or they could do more in a negative way.
Right.
So you really want to have a I mean, not everything works out smoothly, but you want to have a positive experience to
Yeah.
the best of the organization's ability, because that
Hmm.
does get that word of mouth can go both ways.
100%. Right, right, right. Yeah. And that's informing and making sure that the volunteers even know what's going on. What is the impact? Some of them will see it. And if they're in a role that's more behind the scenes, sometimes you have to make sure that you're telling them,
Right.
that look at what, by doing these packets, this helped this, which helped this, which helped this, which made the impact. And so it's, again, sharing all the news and making sure you're aware that all the volunteers know, what the impact is, regardless of their role.
Right. 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 So, we've kind of covered some of my questions. I
That's great.
love it
Oh,
when that
that's
happens.
okay.
So, all right. So, let me just back up just a brief moment. We're talking about the Blood Bank of Delmarva.
Hmm.
most people should know what a blood bank is, but can you give like just a real brief, what do you do? Why do people
Yeah.
come to you?
Yeah, so the blood bank, any blood bank, right, is where, and these have to be nonprofit blood banks because there is a difference between blood collection and where you get paid, actually. There's a
Okay.
very big difference. So when you go to a blood bank where you're not getting paid, that's where they're going to collect about a pint or so of whole blood, or it could be platelets, or it could be plasma. And then they're going to test it, they're processing it, they're making sure it's safe, they're holding it at all the right temperatures and doing all the FDA regulations that they need to do so that then when they transport it to a hospital, it is there and available for the hospital to transfuse to patients. And we, at least for the Blood Bank of Delmarva, which we service about 19 hospitals in the area, going from Baltimore, all of Delaware, Maryland, Eastern Shore, up into Philadelphia, even up into the southern part of Pennsylvania, Chester kind of area, Chester County. And so we all that blood from, if you come to the Blood Bank of Delmarva, that blood stays with us and it stays locally. When you donate to other places, it may or may not stay right in your local area, and that would be something you can ask when you go in and give blood. If you're getting paid for blood, that's actually not going to a patient in the hospital. It's going for other reasons. And so you could ask that location, where does my blood go for this? And so, and there, I don't judge. If somebody needs the money and that's why they're going there, then that's their choice. But I always tell people, if you want your blood to go to a patient in your community, then go to your local blood bank, and that's what the Blood Bank of Delmarva is. And so that's the, I love that about the local, the local blood banks. But in general, blood bank is the one that collects blood from healthy donors and make sure that it's really still safe, and then gets it to the hospitals. And we need 350 people every single day to donate blood to have enough supply. And if there's not enough supply, then we have to try to find it from other places and ship it in and actually purchase that.
Wow.
And if you look across the nation is having a blood shortage. And so it's really challenging post COVID. There's so many reasons. That's a whole nother conversation, but I just encourage everybody to just go donate blood somewhere that you don't get paid if you can, and that will help your local community have the blood they need. And it's for surgeries, it's for accidents, it's for burn patients, it's for blood, those that have diseases, cancer, all those reasons. It's not just, I think we think of like the trauma accident, right?
Right, right, right.
But fortunately, that doesn't happen, every single day, I hope. But a trauma patient can take 70 to 100 units of blood if it's really bad. That's 70 to 100 people in
That's right.
one day
One
accident.
accident. Yeah.
So we
Amazing.
need blood everywhere. So that's
Yes.
my plug for blood. Go get blood. And you get snacks and drinks after. It's always
Woo,
great. And you
fun.
feel great.
That's great. So um how many volunteers, would you say 356 patients a day for blood
Well,
that you
we need
see?
350 blood
You
donors to
blood
come in and
donors
give blood.
a day.
Yep, a
Wow.
day. It's a lot. It's a lot
It
of
is.
people, right? So we need people every day. And we don't have that. We don't have enough people right now. So, eh, do the math and
Yeah.
hope you don't need blood.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite that dire, but it's
Enough to
kind
be
of
a
close.
concern.
It is. We're not like plush with blood, being like, oh, great, we got everything for everybody. It's like, oh, if this hospital might get this and this might get that. And, you hate to be able to, you hate to have to like parse it out and be like, well, do you really need that much?
Yeah.
So we would rather have our shelves full of blood. So can just like be like, yes, what do you need? Great. You know, you get what you need. So that's that. We'll do that. But volunteers, so it's really funny in the blood banking business because normally you think of like a volunteer, a donor, as like a financial donor. That's usually the term. But in the blood banking, a donor is a blood donor.
Right.
So then we've had to come up with like a financial giver
Yeah.
as a term, and then the volunteers are the volunteers of time. Although the blood donors are volunteers because they don't get paid. So
True.
it's really funny, all the semantics.
How many volunteers do you have?
So we have about 300
Okay.
volunteers that come in, and then that's over across Delmarva.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool. Now, how long have you been the volunteer and community relations specialist?
Yeah, so it's coming up to 7 years. So
Oh,
it's been,
wow.
it's flown by. I can't believe I say seven, and I'm like, really? It's gone
Is it that
fast.
long?
It's good. I know.
So you went through all of the pandemic.
Yes. Yes. So I started the fall of 2018. And so I was just getting into my stride, right? And getting
Yeah.
into community events and getting, things going and getting volunteers going. And then COVID hits and it was like, oh my gosh. And so I was really fortunate. A lot of colleagues were let go at some point during not at the blood bank, but I mean, across,
It's just in general.
volunteer
Yeah.
as a volunteer leader. And because they were like, oh, well, we don't need volunteers. So then we don't need the staff person that leads the volunteers, which to me was a huge mistake because now they've lost their volunteers and they have to rebuild from the
From
ground almost.
from
But
scratch.
anyway,
Yeah.
I was fortunate that I was able to stay, and we only kept the volunteers away, I'll say, for 10 weeks. And so then I feel like one of the early places that let volunteers come back in with all the safety precautions of the masks and the
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I think that in those 10 weeks staff really saw, like, there were other staff that had to sit in the cafe canteen area and watch the donors. And so then I was in there a lot. And because we have 5 different centers, and so staff were then having to come off of what they normally do and sit there and serve the snacks and drinks to donors and make sure they're not fainting and all of those things. And I think they realized that, at least in that one particular role, like, volunteers are really important. And so over time, it's been really interesting. Staff have, I think, learned a lot more about how important volunteers are.
Oh,
You don't want that to happen, to have that,
right.
revelation, but the silver lining, came out of that.
Oh, amazing. So it was COVID the reason why you started your volunteer engagement accelerator
Oh, that's a
consulting?
good question. Actually, I was so stressed during COVID. Oh my gosh, there was just so much going on. One, everybody was still trying to figure out, what is COVID, how serious, what's going on, how do I deal with this, right, individually. And then the blood bank, it was like I was on overdrive, and I was feeling burned out. So it's I went out to our EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, and I was like, I'm feeling burned out. Like, what do I do? And so she was actually like, oh, you should start your own your own nonprofit. And I was like, I'm burned out. This is wrong advice. So I
Did you
stopped
not
that
hear
one.
that? Burnout.
Burned out, tired, fried. So fast forward, I took a little time, whatever. I actually then found a different person to talk to, in which I highly encourage counseling, because even if you're not like in like the depths of depression or something, like, it was still really helpful for me to work through some issues and work through my burnout and help go through that. And so in that, I've discovered too, with COVID did help. I discovered that watercolor, and watercolor became a very creative outlet for me. And that led me to then be to really act on something, that a seed that had been planted years and years ago. I think my parents just instilled entrepreneurship with me, because we raised popcorn, and then I had to call my neighbors. I was like in elementary school, middle school, and call our neighbors and be like, Mr. Merle, would you buy 5 pounds of popcorn? So I learned cold calling quick. I
Oh,
mean, we knew
yeah.
the people, but I mean, they weren't going to have me call strangers at that age. But and then we did farmers market, and so anyway, so I think that entrepreneurial spirit has just always, that seed's been in there. And so I got to a point where, like, I really, after increasing the Hagley Museum where I was, and then the blood bank, like increasing like how volunteers are engaged and doing all the foundational pieces and growing each of those engagements. I was like, I want to do this for more nonprofits, because the more I'm in nonprofit world, which has been like pretty much my whole career, um, I was like, there's so much growth that could happen and more impact that could happen in the community, because if each nonprofit is running more effectively, more efficiently, and engaging volunteers more efficiently and effectively, then more impact could be made. And let's like go solve more of these issues, faster. And that's kind of my my force behind this, and my motivation is, I really want to help more people and the community be better. And by doing my part in helping nonprofits in their volunteer engagement on my consulting side of things, then we're going to just make the community a stronger, better place. And I think in today's world, I mean, of what's going on today, we were talking a little bit of just current events, and we need cohesiveness. We need people to be able to have conversations together. And when people volunteer, um, many times, and at the blood bank, I stress that we don't have like shirts that are political. We keep things neutral, and that's part of my training of volunteers, so that I do believe that we have volunteers that are coming from different angles of an issue, but because there's a common cause. And I've not heard that this has happened, so I'm hopeful it hasn't, right? That, we don't have people arguing about politics. We don't have people arguing about whatever it is, whichever angle you're coming from. Because been pretty much like, keep it neutral. Like, this is not the place for politics. This is not the place for, really divisive situations or topics. So it's really cool to be able to volunteer and to come alongside somebody who you don't know if they have the same or different ideology as you, but you can still work together, right? And I think we need so much more of that, of bringing people together to be like, we're not enemies. Like,
Right.
it's really not. And it makes my heart break when I just see like people can't have civil conversations anymore about a differing opinion. And I'm hopeful that volunteering can help with that.
And I believe it will. That's why we do the art of volunteering, to
Yeah.
just, because I truly believe that volunteers help to transform the
Yeah.
fabric of our society.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay,
Yeah.
so where did your volunteer journey begin? Like, what lit
Yeah.
this passion for volunteers? Has to have a starting point.
Well, I think it's really, the voluntary picking up trash, right? That
Yeah,
was kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
like, it was a family thing. So it was kind of fun. We got these vests and, the
yeah.
pickup sticks and the thing. And I don't know, as a kid, that was kind of cool. And we got the tickets and we got the concerts. I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Like, that was my paycheck, was the concert. But also, my parents instilled that, I think, a lot. We were very involved with church. My mom ended up being the building committee for a chairperson of, they were building a new church building. And so she did a lot of that. I think just watching my parents with all the things that they did voluntarily in the neighborhood, and then watching other people come and help us. As a kid, my mom got mono and it wiped her out. She was on the couch for like, I don't know, a month or two. And I'm a small kid, and so we had neighbors that would come in and help us with the laundry, help us make our beds, like help with house cleaning. And I mean, I don't remember all of it, but I know that they were helping us. I knew that they were doing that, and I was like, wow, they're not, I think all of that, as a kid, I wasn't thinking, oh, they're not getting paid for that. It was just,
Right.
wow, these people are coming in and helping us. So I think all of those things help shape that. And then just being involved as a volunteer in other organizations, in college, getting involved with the extracurricular, committees and groups and things. Like, you start networking, you learn from other people. It makes your life richer. You have opportunities, at least I did, to be, if you want, in leadership roles. And so becoming the president of whatever, or the leader of whatever, it gives you those opportunities to practice skills of leading other people, or whatever it is that your interest is. And so I think that has just really shaped all of that. Um, yeah, it's really intriguing. And so when I went through, I was in biology major, and then I was like, well, I don't want to do pre-med, right? And then I didn't want to do research, because I was doing research on, or with a professor in the lab, and I was like, rooting hormones for cashew trees, and I found myself like, shake, 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 and I was like, oh, this is like I cook, shake, 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 like, I wasn't measure. I was like, oh, you gotta measure this stuff, you gotta repeat it. I was like, oh, this is not gonna be for me. So I was like lost. And so when I came, um, I, a supervisor from the park system, because I worked outside and I like plants, told me about this place called Longwood Gardens, and they had this University of Delaware program where you get your master's in public horticulture administration. It just tied everything together for me, because it was people and it was plants and it put it all together. So going through that program was, and see, that's a program, right? You go through a program and then there's an end date. So engagement is not that. Um, so when I got through that program, then I started working at a university on the grounds, but I knew I always wanted to get back to people. Longwood had an opening, so I came back and I was in the education department. And that's where it was so cool to see like people learning and engaging and community relations. But then it was even more. And then the person that had, there's the adult continuing education programs that were there. And then I saw volunteers were helping. I was like, well, that's really intriguing. And so that kind of started showing me in real life what volunteers were doing and that it could be like an engagement in an organization. So that's where my next role, I went into a volunteer leadership role at the next museum that I went to. So I think all of that has done that. My church opportunities of volunteering and helping in so many different ways, helping in other, like the tree commission of our little city. That's all volunteer work, and now I'm so, just, it makes me so happy, and I get the little rush of the good endorphins, right? Endorphins, is that the right hormones, the happy hormones, right? When I'm driving down the street and I'm like, oh, that tree was there because of the tree commission. Oh, that tree's there because of the tree commission, and it's going to be so beautiful in like 20 years. So it's just all those things I think have really prompted me and encouraged, the flourishment in that volunteer world.
Oh, amazing. I love
Yeah.
that.
So
All right. Can you share a story of impact from BBD, from work that you've done with your consulting in a nonprofit, or just in your journey, something where you've seen a direct from something you or the people you're with, and what that really did in real time.
yeah, so a couple things. So in my consulting, I was working with a very small nonprofit, and two sisters are running the organization. So I was working with the one for the most part. And then there was one meeting where both of them were on, which was great. And the second sister that I hadn't really worked with said, we are so happy. She's like, we feel like we're grown up and we're getting more professional and we're just moving to the next level in this organization. And that was just so satisfying for me to know that they are thinking differently, right, about volunteer engagement and how to engage them in a really good way, and how that is going to make an impact moving forward for them, and just even their mindset has changed. And so how cool is that, that organization now is thinking more as an organization at a different level. Their board was supportive of them, having me come in, and so it was just, it helped their board relationship. It's just helped so many things. So that was really cool to see that happening. And at the blood bank, I think it's just so satisfying. We did a survey of the donors while they're sitting having their snacks and drinks. Maybe it's because they have their snacks and drinks and they're happy, but they gave the volunteers 100%, like, 5-star rating of how they feel with the volunteers and how they're doing. And so it's impacting the donors in such a good way. The volunteers, then the stories that I'm hearing, that, this volunteer, again, volunteers can do amazing things. Volunteers do all these stories and interviews and put the summary together. And so it's just seeing how, like, a volunteer comes to me and it's like, my husband passed away 2 years, and this is just giving me like so much meaning in my life and giving me purpose and giving me something to do that's meaningful. That's impacting individual lives in such meaningful ways. And that just, it's cool, right? It's really, really happy. So how can you not be happy with that?
I love it. I think that's awesome. So, we're getting close to the end of our
Yeah.
conversation. I want to try this question out of you. We talked about it
Okay.
before, and you're like, I don't know. Do you have a blooper? Now, remember, bloopers doesn't mean something went
Yeah.
wrong. Like we
Right.
think of catastrophe. Like it just didn't go as planned. You were thinking we're going to go left, and we ended up going right, and right was better because, or I learned this. What, anything?
Yeah. Well, so I think one thing that I've learned, blooper, whatever it is along the way, but going different directions. So I like to really plan ahead. I'm kind of a type A perfectionist kind of person. So I have like, I try to plan ahead and I really want to make sure that the volunteers have what they need and all of those things, right? So that when they come, they have the best experience possible. But I have learned that I can do all the planning and be thinking that we're going to go this way with this and we're going to do it in this manner. But I have learned that if I say what the end result is that I want, right? That's the most important. Make it very clear. Like at the end, we need this, 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 and this to have happened or been done or completed or whatever. And I let the process, let them figure out the process in a way, not like letting them flounder, but
Right,
like
right, right.
giving them that freedom to be like, well, how about this? And can we do it this way? And da da da. I find out that they're actually better at it than I am, and I'm like, oh, that actually would be great. That'd be better. Okay, go for it. Let's just go. So I have learned that sometimes my way is good, and sometimes their way is better. And it's certainly been a process to learn that, but also very freeing and really exciting. And it doesn't work for every volunteer because some volunteers really want to just be given the instructions and they want to follow it. They're a procedural kind of volunteer and they want to know what's going on and what the expectations are for each step. So some of them do want it spelled out. But there are other volunteers that are coming because everybody comes with, again, their different skill set and their different viewpoint and their different perspective. And they may have done something similar to this in their job and they learned that XYZ was more efficient than my ABC.
Right, right.
So yeah, so I think
I
that
like that. That's a
letting go and giving them some freedom within, again, within reason is a really good thing.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Actually, it's not even a question. I'm going
Yep.
to give you the mic. And I
Yeah.
want you to love. Like, just imagine the Philadelphia love sign, all the capital
Yes.
letters. I want you to
Yes.
love on Volunteer Engagement Accelerator, love on the
Yeah.
BBD, your volunteers. Or if there's something that you wanted to bring up that we didn't cover during our conversation, now is the time to do it. The mic is yours.
Thank you. So with my consulting, I just love that. It's been a lot of work. But I what I love about that is that it's been challenging me. It has been growing me. It's been something that I think I could have done a long time ago, but I think I just mentally wasn't ready for that or emotionally or something, just wasn't ready to take that leap of faith. And so I'm really excited personally how I'm developing with that and meeting people like you. And I'm just so excited. And so it's just been so incredible, the people that I meet. And so that leads me to loving on people because there have been so many people in this journey for me and have been encouraging me. In fact, I'll on my wall, I have little thank you notes along with my little
Oh,
certificates. But these are cards, or not thank you notes, but these are encouragement cards. They're thank you cards. They're inspiration for me that people have sent to me. And so I have made this it was my watercolor wall, but I've kind of made it my little like inspiration wall of people that have written me notes. And so many different people have encouraged me by phone or email or whatever when I'm down, or I'm like, is this like in general, like not even my business, but like, is volunteer thing okay? Am I okay? Am I doing the right thing? Like how, I don't know. I think maybe I'm the only one that gets discouraged sometimes, but like, am I making a difference? Like, is this okay in life? Like whatever. And so I think that just loving on people that have invested in me has just been phenomenal. And it's come from all over different areas. And so to everybody that's invested in me, thank you. And then I encourage people to invest in other people because you just don't know how that's going to affect them. And it can just be a little note, it can be a little email, it could be just a little like, hey, you're doing good in XYZ. Thank you for all of those things. It just, again, goes back to that relationship and people and community. And so I just want to love on and thank the village of people all around that have invested me in so many different ways in my lifetime. And so it's, from teachers to pastors to other colleagues to my friends, my family, like everybody, right? It's just, I think we are the sum of so many different people along with our own individual, personality and experiences, but we don't do this alone. And I don't take that for granted. And so, So loving all the people. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being my guest
Yeah.
today. I have
Thank
so
you.
enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
We'll have to, next time we're going to come on, we're going to talk about how we report out volunteer engagement
Oh, I love that.
and what that
Yes.
looks like.
Ah, yes.
I hope my audience agrees with me. I think we're going to have just conversations like this every so often and pick a new topic.
Love
I'd
that.
like to dive into that because um, many reports just have 153 volunteer hours. Well,
Oh,
what went
yes.
into that volunteer hours? What was the impact of it? So,
Right.
start
Yes.
making your notes now. That's our next
Got it.
conversation.
Love that.
Okay. So, to my listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. I know you found value in it because we covered things we haven't talked about before. So, if you would rate and review it wherever you're listening, or even share it with a friend who could value thinking about their volunteer programs and making them strategies. So, just rate and review. It really does help other people hear about the transformative work that volunteers are doing for our fabric of our society. So, thank you. I'll see you next time on The Art of Volunteering. Have a great day. Bye bye.